So in this video, I wanted to share 5 tips for teaching yourself how to code. And the reason I wanted to do this is because there's so many tutorials and courses out there that sometimes it's hard to understand how to even use the resources themselves to going from zero to knowing how to code. And a lot of people are frustrated because their learning is inefficient. So what I wanted to do is share 5 tips for how you can make your learning more efficient so that you can see faster progress and stay excited about what you're doing. So here are my 5 tips for teaching yourself how to code. Tip number 1 is to learn by doing. You can't just read a programming book and expect to know how to code. You actually have to get your hands on what you're doing. It's somewhat tactile. So this might look like following along with a course or a tutorial and just typing what the person is doing, even if you don't quite understand what's going on. This is still going to give you a better understanding if you were to just passively watch the course yourself. The other aspect of learning by doing is daily practice. You have to practice programming every day if you're going to get any good. You can't really cram when learning to code like you might cram for a test. You actually have to work on it daily in order for your mind to effectively absorb the knowledge and turn it into a skill. Tip number 2 is skill first, understanding second. You don't want to overload yourself with too much conceptual knowledge when you're first trying to figure out how to code. In fact, you don't even have to always know how the car works in order to drive it. You can learn a programming language a lot like you learned a written language. I bet that you learned to talk before you could write. I also bet that you learned to communicate ideas before you learned grammar. And I also bet that you learned to use some words that you didn't know the definitions to, but you just absorbed them because you heard them in conversation. Learning a programming language can be very similar. Sometimes you just recognize a pattern and you learn to apply it. You might have seen it in a tutorial, you might have seen it in a book, you might have seen it in a blog post, and you simply take the pattern and use it to accomplish something even that you don't fully understand. You might just make a button appear on a page and get it to do the thing you want it to do, but you didn't quite understand how that happened. That's okay. Take this skill, use it as much as you can, and then go look up why it works. Gain the understanding after you've gained the skill. Tip number 3 is to learn the language as you go. This is where the 80-20 principle comes in, where roughly 80% of the results in your applications are going to come from about 20% of your language competency. When you're building apps, a lot of times you're working with frameworks or libraries. These are just toolkits that enable you to write applications without having to write every detail of the application on your own. These tools are going to give you lots of results without having to know every single detail about how they work. In order to use these, you're only going to need about 20% of the language competency in order to see results. That should be your immediate goal as a beginner, to gain the 20% of understanding you need to accomplish 80% of the results. Tip number 4 is to build things yourself. This is where you turn your knowledge into a true skill. I recommend that you do this as fast as possible, even if you haven't finished your code tutorials yet. Here's why. When you're building things on your own, you're going to run into walls, and this will expose what you don't understand. Now, this sounds scary at first, but it gives you the opportunity to go figure that thing out for yourself. This will build real problem-solving skills, it will build your self-initiative, and it will produce an amazing sense of accomplishment once you figured out how to do the thing you didn't know how to do. And if you can't get past what you don't know, you might want to go back and revisit your code tutorials to get the fundamentals and sharpen those that will enable you to get past the thing that you don't know. So as fast as you can, go out there and start building stuff for yourself. Tip number 5 is to guzzle and don't sip. So there might be a temptation to work through things very slowly until you understand it and then move on to the next thing. That's the wrong way to learn how to code. When you're learning something brand new, you really need context to see how everything else fits into place. You really need a wide base of knowledge for other knowledge to rest upon. So you want to try to guzzle as many resources and pieces of information about the specific language that you want to learn. So for example, let's say you're doing a tutorial that has 10 levels, and you might be tempted to stay in level 1 until you understand 100% of level 1. That's not the best thing to do. You want to try to play through the entire course as fast as possible so that you can gain the context you need to revisit the course and understand what's happening in each level. I can almost guarantee, if the course is designed well, that you will understand level 1 way more after you've done the entire course, rather than trying to just stay in level 1 until you feel really confident to move on to level 2. So make sure you guzzle the information, don't sip. Okay, so those are my 5 tips on learning how to code. Be sure to click the subscribe link at the end of this channel, and I'll be releasing more videos that teach you how to code.